Welcome back. In this video, we are going over batter-generated risks, and we're also going over life-generated risks. So remember to subscribe or follow depending on where you're watching this from, and let me know if there's anything in this video that you guys want me to expand on in the coming videos. So let's talk about batter-generated risks. In this format, they have divided the different possible risks. And so this is basically saying, okay, these are the possible risks if the victim stays in the relationship, and these are possible risks if the victim leaves the relationship. So for physical violence, these are some considerations. The batterer could continue to hit and injure the victim, and the batterer could even kill them. Through unsafe behavior with their partner, the victim may have no choice regarding sex, including whether to practice safe sex, and may also be sexually assaulted by the batterer, resulting in life-lasting STDs. So what are some physical risks of leaving? Well, the batterer can continue to hit and injure the victim even after they leave. Some studies have shown that the risk of physical injury increases when victims leave or attempt to leave. And these threats can surface when a victim explores leaving or tries to leave, and thoughts of, if I can't have you, nobody will. On the part of the abuser, leaving does not ensure that the victim will not be found and may increase the chance of homicide. And as far as STDs, unsafe behavior with the victim's partner may continue. The victim may also be sexually assaulted by the batterer even when she tries to leave, or he. So what are some psychological risks if the person stays in the relationship? The batterer's use of violence to keep control will continue to affect the victim, who may be attacked verbally and emotionally. The victim may abuse drugs or alcohol to help cope with the emotional and physical pain. And long-term, the victim may experience psychological issues. Suicide is also a psychological risk in domestic violence, and the batterer could commit murder or suicide. The victim may commit suicide as a result of the psychological effects of the violence or a desire to take control of a death that may seem inevitable. So, what are some of the psychological risks of leaving the relationship? The batterer may continue to have access to the victim, particularly if they have children in common and there is ongoing contact due to court-ordered visitation. Even if the victim leaves, the addiction will likely continue and may include drugs and/or alcohol to cope with the new life situation. And long-term, the victim may experience psychological issues, including suicide. The batterer could commit suicide or murder in this case, and the victim, same thing. And the desire to take control of a death that may seem inevitable is a risk either way. So what are some family and children risks to staying in the relationship? Physical injury or psychological harm to children. Children may witness violence, be the object of physical violence or psychological attack, be hurt while trying to protect their parents or guardian. And parents could lose their children. Child Protective Services could become involved if violence is disclosed. A failure to protect type of argument could be used to place children in foster care proceed in termination of parental rights case. And being alone, single parenting, the batterer could be emotionally unavailable and do little to help with the children. So what are some risks for the children if you leave the relationship? Physical injury or psychological harm to the children. Children can witness violence, be the object of violence or psychological attack, be hurt while trying to protect their parents and guardians, and may be at greater risk while on visitation without parent victim present. No visitation may also harm the child. Loss of child. The batterer could legally gain custody or just take the children. Child Protective Services could still be involved or become involved. Lastly, being alone, single parenting, the batterer is unavailable and the victim may not be able or want to find someone new. The batterer may not visit or help raise the children, and it may not be safe for the children to have contact with the batterer. So, what are some financial risks? Standard of living. The batterer can control the money and provide little money to live on. The batterer could lose or quit his job, or could make the victim lose or quit a job. Financial risks of staying with the abuser continued. Loss of income or job. The batterer could keep the victim from working or limit work time. The batterer could sabotage efforts to find a job, succeed at a job, or pursue job training. Loss of housing. The victim could be evicted due to disturbance or damage the batterer has done. And last but not least, loss or damage to possessions. The batterer may destroy things of importance or value to the victim for further control. So let's talk about the risks of leaving. As you probably noticed by now, a lot of them are the same. So the standard of living, the risk is the same. For loss or damage of possessions, the risk is the same. For loss of income or job, the victim could lose his income, have to quit a job to relocate, have to quit if due to being a single parent, and the batterer could keep the victim from working by harassment or threats. For loss of housing, the victim may need to move out to leave the relationship or go into hiding for safety. The victim could lose their residence as a part of the divorce. Over here in the loss of damage of possessions that continues, the victim may have to leave things behind when leaving. The batterer may win the right to possessions in a divorce proceeding. So those are the financial risks of staying and leaving in the relationship. Let's talk about family and friend risks. Threat or injury to a family or friend. Family and friends may be at risk, particularly if they try to intervene. Loss of family or friend support. They may want the victim to leave and may not provide ongoing support if there is no separation. They may not like or may be afraid of the batterer, who may keep the victim isolated from them. And possible risks trying to leave involve threats or injury to family or friends. Friends or family may be at risk, particularly if they try to intervene, protect the victim, provide the victim with housing. Threats can be used to keep the victim from going into hiding. Quote, "If I don't know where you are, I'll get your family." And for the loss of family or friend support, they may not want the victim to leave the batterer. They may blame the victim for the end of the relationship. Some relationship-based risks. If the victim leaves the relationship, the batterer could leave her or be unavailable emotionally. If the victim is disabled and the batterer is the caretaker, the batterer may not provide adequate care. If they try to leave, however, leaving means the loss of a partner and significant change to the relationship. Loss of a caretaker. If the victim is disabled and the batterer is the caretaker, the batterer will no longer be there to help the victim. And last but not least, the arrest legal status. Risks for staying in the relationship. And these look like they're the same whether you leave or not. The batterer could threaten to turn in the victim for participation in illegal activity. The batterer may force the victim to participate in criminal activity. The victim could engage in self-defense and be charged with a crime. Arrest could lead to incarceration, loss of job, loss of children, and public embarrassment. The batterer might be arrested, leading to retaliation, the loss of job, public embarrassment for the victim again. And last but not least, the batterer could carry out that threat. If the victim tries to leave the relationship. Same exact risk of arrest of victim. And in addition to that, the batterer might be arrested, leading to his retaliation. His loss of job, public embarrassment for her and her family. So that's also the same. It looks like all the way down the board, the legal status risk is the same either way. So let's go ahead and hop on over to life-generated risks. And in this video, it's only one page, so it should go by pretty quickly. And remember, while you're here, to give this video a thumbs up, and remember to subscribe, follow, depending on where you're watching this from, and leave a comment letting me know what you thought while you were here. Life-generated risks. Life-generated risks of staying in the relationship. Mobility, job choice, transportation, availability of telephone, which adds to isolation and fewer safety options, healthcare, housing options, and building credit. Am I reading this right? Possible uses of life-generated risk by the batterer, possible effects of life-generated risk. So let's just assume that this is just the same thing in different words, and assume that these are both risks that they face if the victim leaves the relationship. Use financial constraints to limit the victim's independence and further isolate, like they can't go out, make phone calls, or have a car. And they could use these life-generated risks to reinforce the message that the victim couldn't afford to live without the batterer. So this is looking a little bit more like how things are taken advantage of. So these are like everyday life things that like everybody goes through. Everybody's going to have these choices and these kind of limitations. So how does the abuser kind of use that to his advantage? And for the effects, I'm guessing that's just like any type of effect that happens when you enter a relationship, is you have to consider these choices here on the left column. So let's talk about home location. So some things to think about in any relationship: resources may be unavailable, and there may be a lack of transportation that could limit options. Some ways that the abuser could use this to their advantage is they could use this limitation to further control. Some physical health issues that could arise from the relationship could be or involve services or resources may be inaccessible, and people may inaccurately judge a victim's ability. The victim may face discrimination and bias as well. And the way that the abuser uses this to his advantage is they could use the disability to keep the victim trapped and isolated. They could remove devices that increase the victim's mobility. And moving on now to health issues. Some health issues that could arise involve services or resources that may be inaccessible. People who may inaccurately judge a victim's ability, and victims may face discrimination and bias, just as with the physical stuff. And the way the abuser might use this to his advantage is using the victim's disability as a topic to humiliate and abuse, threaten or use the victim's disability to have the victim hospitalized, medicated, or labeled, and threaten or use the victim's disability to keep the victim from getting custody or access to children. Whew. Moving right on down the list. Inadequate responses by major social institutions. For example, this may involve keeping victims from seeking help, leading to ineffective responses and insensitive responses as well, and may keep victims from getting any help from institutions. The way that the abuser will use this to his advantage is failure to help the victim may reinforce the batterer's control and inadvertently perpetuate what they're doing. Secondly, if the victim doesn't believe the system will help, there are fewer options for safety. Discrimination based on race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, and preferences, or other bias is our last but not least section for today. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. So for discrimination based on race, ethnicity, gender, sexual preference, or other bias, some ways that this may affect the victim involve keeping people from believing what victims are telling them can lead to ineffective or harmful responses from the legal system and others, keeping victims from getting or advancing in employment, from living where they want to live, from disclosing the violence, from getting credit, loans, mortgages, from accessing the help they need, leading victims to believe no one will help them and they may not receive help, keeping victims from defending themselves for fear they are more likely to be arrested, convicted, and incarcerated or lose their children, keeping victims from getting effective health care, substance abuse, and other treatments, as well as keeping the victim from educational opportunities. And ways that the abuser uses this to his advantage include using the victim's perception of discrimination to convince the victim that there are few options and resources, benefits from the reality of discrimination that limits his partner's options for resources, uses the possibility that the batterer will be discriminated against to convince the partner not to seek help, particularly from law enforcement. Lesbian or gay partners may use the threat of disclosure of the relationship and potential resulting harm to control the partner. And last but not least, benefits from the negative messages of bias and discrimination that can reinforce his devaluing of the victim, further encouraging this dependency that the victim has on the batterer. All right, guys, remember that if you or someone you know is a victim of domestic violence, sexual violence, bullying, rape, or any of the above, help is available 24/7 at the Domestic Violence Hotline. All the information for that is down below. Remember to stay safe out there, and I will see you soon.